afternoon. Good afternoon. It's so... Thank you, John. And thank you, everyone, for being with us for what promises to be a fabulous presentation. I'm Ann Collins-Goodyear, co-director of the Bowdoin College Museum of Art. And this afternoon, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to a presentation by Emilie Stark-Menneg. Over close to a year, and actually well before that, I have had the pleasure of being engaged with Emilie in a conversation related to the exhibition now on view at the BCMA, Emilie Stark-Menneg's Supernatural. Emilie, as is well known to the audience gathered here today, is an exceptional artist based in Mid-Coast, Maine. She tests herself continually through her practice, which encompasses a broad range of media and techniques, as our current exhibition demonstrates. Over the course of her career, her ambitious projects have incorporated painting, video, sculpture, animation, and performance, and her work has been exhibited around the world, from cities here in Maine to New York, Los Angeles, Hong Kong, and Taipei. In recent years, her work has appeared in biennials at the Portland Museum of Art and the De Cordova Museum of Art, and is now part of the permanent collection of the Farnsworth and is now on view at the Farnsworth, in addition to right next door. She earned her MFA from the Rhode Island School of Design in 2019 and has recently been awarded a Surf Point Foundation residency in York, Maine. As those of you who have had an opportunity to see her exhibition know, it consists of a complex suite of 8 intersecting works, 2 of which are virtual, created by Emilie in response to historic and contemporary artworks in the museum's collection, which are also on view in the show. The resulting project positions the viewer in a space that evokes an enchanted forest, rife with startling and intriguing sights. And like all enchanted forests, it reveals something about our own experience, the metaphorical implications of the passing seasons that testify to the porosity of life and art, the intersection of human life and nature, and the regeneration of life that comes with death. The multi-layered artworks that Emilie has created suggest a complexity of conception and execution that cannot be contained by the gallery. For this reason, I am thrilled that she has agreed to speak to her work this evening, providing insight into the making of Emilie Stark-Menneg's Supernatural. Please join me in welcoming Emilie Stark-Menneg. We look forward to a discussion following her presentation and to welcoming you to the museum to see her work in person. Emilie. Hi, everybody. It is really, I have to say, totally magical to look out into this crowd and see all of your beautiful faces. And thank you so much for being here. So today, let's see if I can just get my mouse moving correctly. Dun, dun, dun. All the tech, I swear, was worked out beforehand.
It's going great.
Well, you know, I hope this comes back. We'll see. Today I want to talk to you about the making of Supernatural, which is the show up at the Bowdoin Museum right next door. And it's curated by co-director Ann Collins-Goodyear. And you were such a dream to work with. Our conversations totally ignited my imagination. And Anne also wrote the beautiful wall text that accompanies the show. And so thank you so much. Here's an installation shot of the show. I also want to thank co-director Frank Goodyear and the entire museum staff for all of the amazing expertise and generosity and time that you all spent working with me on the show and continuing into the future as the show is still up. Yay! And also to lighting designer Austin Shull, who I'm not sure if he's here, but I really feel like we talked about the vibe of the show and it was like murky, and I really feel like he made murky look sexy, so that was really exciting. To my parents, my mom came up with a crew of her wonderful friends and friends of mine, so that feels really amazing. And both of them are incredible artists and have inspired me my whole life. To everyone who's helped along the way, thank you so much. And John Bisbee, where are you? John Bisbee! I couldn't have done it without you. There's going to be more thank yous along the way, but we're going to roll into the talk now. So I wanted to start at the beginning, which was this idea of a show thinking about experiments. And I was thinking about this idea of levitating images and how to make an image levitate like a hologram or apparition, a ghost. And how these levitating images related to ideas, if they did, related to ideas of spirituality, magic, and transformation. This is a piece in their collection that's included in the show by Folk Art de Jong, and it's called When H2 Leaves O, and it's from 2015. And I just love this piece. It's incredible when you walk around it. It almost feels like it's a self-portrait. It almost feels like the skin of the face is possibly decaying and becoming the inside body, the skull, this sort of corpse. And so I felt like it really dealt with this idea of a transformation between life and death, and then using a new kind of technology. So thinking about how this new technology, what that might bring to this concept. These are two prints that I selected from the British painter Chris O'Feely's series of line etchings on paper, Black Shunga. And it's sort of hard to tell, but there are these gorgeous layering of different materials, different inks, and there's this haunting sort of blue nightscape. And then on the top is this very delicate line work that almost feels like it's made out of spider silk. And I loved how, and it shows these images of erotic bliss. And I love how the images both appears and disappears. And in that way, it kind of creates this secret space or a protected, I feel like, sacred space. On the left-hand side, you can see that there are these beautiful, like gushing volcanic, I feel like milk from this woman's breast, and it's shooting up into the galaxies. And then on the right-hand side, there's the artist painting, and I feel like depicting the painting itself or the print itself. So embedded in it is the making of it, which I also really loved. This is another one, and at this point in the show, at this point in working on the show, I'm having this surprising realization. So as I'm trying to do this sort of pseudo-scientific experimentation, I'm realizing that I'm simultaneously collecting sort of
ideas and narratives and images that will form a fairy tale or a new story. So in this one, I was particularly drawn to this star shower that's happening. And then it will show up later in the AR animation that I made for the show. So here's another piece from the collection in the show, and it's one of my favorites. And it goes along again with this idea of objects that contain this secret power. It's the prayer bead with scenes from the life of Saint Jerome from the workshop of Adam Dirks, 1500 to 1530. And it's on loan to the BCMA from the Wyvern collection. And this is giant on the screen, but in real life, it's this big, and it sits in the palm of your hand. And I just thought, that is the most magical thing, that you get to hold this nut in your hand, and the outside is this abstract pattern. And then when you open it up, you see the entire universe unfold, this kind of world that tells the saga of the saint under the canopy of the heavens. And so I'm, again, looking at this relationship between this kind of, the precision of this. I don't quite understand how it's made. I know that it is made out of laminated pieces of boxwood, but there seems to be something sort of beguiling about it, which I think might add to the spiritual power of it. This is also a tiny little sacred gem. It's from the Wyvern collection also, and it's a reliquary with rock crystal vessel from 1200 to 1230 from Belgium, France, Germany, or the Netherlands. And it encloses some part of a Christian saint. And that is also just thrilling to me. It's because I just am like, what is in here? And what magic does it then spread through the world as it's traveled through time to get here today? Sort of thinking about its aura and how that these little tendrils of spirit connect to all of us. This is another small piece in the show, plaque with the Tree of Jess, and it's from 1500 Germany or France, and it's carved mother of pearl from the Wyvern collection, and it depicts the ancestors of Jesus Christ. The technical innovation on this too also is dazzling to me because mother of pearl is extremely delicate. And so again, there's this feeling of this almost impossible picture that's been made to show something about the ineffable, something about something beyond some kind of scientific understanding. And so I'm like totally on board. Also, this piece, I loved how it related to the myth of Daphne and Apollo. In my mind, I started seeing this tree as relating to the laurel tree that you're about to see. Apollo and Daphne. I think of this piece as the heart of the show. It's a painting by Pontermo from 1513, and it's based on the myth of Daphne and Apollo in Ovid's Metamorphosis. So for those of you who don't know the myth, it's basically that Apollo gets hit with Cupid's arrow. He turns and he sees Daphne, this nymph bathing in a river, and he is all in. Just like hard eyes for her. So he's like, whew, he starts chasing after her, and she is not into this. So she starts running away, and he's chasing her. He will not give up. And she's running, and she becomes extremely terrified. And at this point, he's getting closer and closer, and so she prays to her mother, the earth goddess, to help her escape. And her mother sort of swoops in with magical, supernatural energy. And at that moment, Daphne transforms into a laurel tree. And Apollo still is madly in love with her, so he continues to worship the laurel tree. I have never found the end of that myth satisfying. So this show, and again, this was a very organic process. As I'm digging into all these pieces in the collection, I'm realizing that I want to tell a new story. Because Daphne, I feel like, needs to have, trees are beautiful and lovely and can totally sway in the wind. But I was thinking that Daphne could have more agency, more freedom. So I created a new story. And in this new story, as she's running and as she's turning into a laurel tree, she flips around as Apollo is coming, and she impales him with one of her new stick arms. Yes, yeah. So then Apollo is still madly in love with her, and he falls into her arms and dies an ecstatic death, where he actually starts to transform into a tree, and she's still transforming, and then they start levitating, and then they explode into a kind of cosmic Big Bang. Stars rain down like seeds, and then from the earth, a new Daphne emerges as a field of flowers. The end. So these were the two sculptures that were sort of the beginning and middle of that story. And beautiful photos by Luc Demers. And so the idea is where to tell this story, how to tell this story. So one thought, again, going with this idea of floating impossible images, I was like, I would love to embed in the sculptures the spirit of the sculptures. So to have this AR animation that when you see the QR code on the edge of each, carved into the edge of each sculpture, you could access this, the story would come to life and then sort of be free and roam around the room. So I have the QR codes here. We did a test earlier, and for some reason in this room, they might not work well, but if you want to try it, and then you can also have it in your phone for later, take it around town. It's also, thank you, Kathy, it's also on the brochure, the two different codes. But if you want to try it right now, this is the Chase one, the first one. And yeah, so it was somewhat trouble loading, but some people were able to do it. I'll give you a few minutes.
I'm having some trouble with it.
John, you have a flip phone. Okay, I'll take this moment also to thank Elijah Ober, who is amazing. Choo-choo fish! And he's at Skowhegan right now. But he animated my wildest dreams, and I could not have done it without him. He was just incredible in this process. Is it working? Has anyone if you've gotten it, raise your hand. No? Oh, Michael. It's moving? Yeah. Great. Success. So, while you guys are looking at that, I'll also just play it for you. This is the first one. And this is in our backyard. So yeah, the idea is take it around town, wherever you like. And this is the second one. This is the second part 2 of the animation. And this one, too, you can walk right through those flowers. So. No one was harmed in the making of this. So that's that. Time for the 3D glasses. The red eye is the left eye. Oh, I want to take a picture of you guys. That's so good. It does.
You might have to share with your
Yes. So this again was one of those winding roads that I went down on this show, which I'm so glad I did. But I was thinking about the original Pontermo painting and thought, oh, well, I'd love to play with this idea of creating an illusion. So in that painting, it uses grisaille and illusionistic techniques to create this kind of what looks like they're sculptures in a way. And I was like, what would be a contemporary version of that? And so I'm like, a hologram. And then, I read about how to make a hologram, and that was really complicated. So then I was like, oh, I'll do the sort of DIY version, which is, I thought, these 3D glasses. And it's a stereoscopic photo. And I was like, oh, I'll just take 2 pictures of the painting from 2 different points of view. But it turns out that you need actual depth of field. So then I was like, well, then I'll make sculptures of the painting to create this effect and then send them out into the woods for the scene. And so that's how I arrived at this iteration of this kind of floating world. And now I'm going to show you a couple of process shots so you can see that the entire show was a metamorphosis of one material into another, which was a fascinating and challenging exploration. So these are the original clay sculptures based on the painting out of oil clay. And this is the second one out of oil clay. And then David Israel, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but he was here in our house scanning the sculpture with a 3D scanner. And there's our dog, Waffles. He's going to be in here a few times. But it's a fascinating, like an incredible procedure that I was totally new to. And then we sent those files to Elijah Ober, who, having never 3D printed before, bless his heart, volunteered to 3D print my sculptures.
For money.
For money, yes. And it almost killed him. The process is so technical, so time-consuming. But here's the thing: is Elijah finished them, and that was incredibly moving to me that he stuck with it. So they were, it's out of resin, and they're assembled in many parts. And very cool, also, my mom had mentioned this, that it's sort of like the wyvern prayer bead net, because that is laminated boxwood, and the resin is similarly built up in these very thin layers. So this is Scott Stewart, who's a master woodworker and designer and dear friend, and he did the finish work on the sculptures. And so this was the base coat, and then there were 15 coats of automotive paint. I got very excited about automotive paint. I had really wanted this idea going back to sort of the mother of pearl Tree of Jess piece of this somehow like this pearl had been dredged up from the bottom of some ancient sea cave in the ocean to create this fantastical sculpture where you might not know how it was made. So this is back to the Pontermo painting, and I'm bringing it back to this with the frame because the other story attached to this painting that I just totally fell in love with and really inspired a lot of the show was the original story about how it was made. And so it was commissioned by the Medicis in 1513 in Florence to go on the side of a carriage as a few different panels that would almost be like scene painting or something. And then the carriage would go through the streets of Florence in the middle of a carnival at night by torchlight with chanting. And I just thought, wow, that is a totally different experience than seeing it in a frame. And how to conjure some of that magic or that immersion. So then, I was like, well, I want to make a cinematic experience that then I can have these reference photos for a large painting. So this is beautifully captured by Andrew Esty. Where are you? So I dragged Andy and John. John had just had his first hip surgery. This is covered in ice. It's very dangerous. And Kathy Simmons, who's driving the sleigh, she and her family and their horses just rallied and made this happen. And it was, I have to say, pure joy to glide and paint.
That was a blank canvas when you started that.
I did all that on the ride. It was also freezing. Which brings us to this large painting called Sleighing. Thank you, John, for the title. And here's this idea again of conjuring this world, of sort of that being, maybe even going from one world into the next, and that idea of motion and flying through from something very real to something kind of mysterious. I loved what Anne wrote about this painting, so I'm going to read a short quote. Meditating on the relationship between life and death, spring's fecundity and winter's snows, Sleighing suggests the rapidity with which the pleasure of life can transform into its opposite, a reversal emphasized by the double entendre implicit in the title, which suggests activities both fun and fatal. So I love that tension between life and death and how that can surface. Here's a detail that I would just wanted to point out, some other tendrils to objects in the show. So here I'm thinking about Chris O'Feely and how he has the artist painting in his prints. And I also, this is sort of the wonderful, surprising part of the whole journey. There were all these things where Anne would come in for these conversations in my studio, and she would point something out to me that I had no idea was there. And I would always be like, wow, that's so exciting. So I'm painting the Pontermo painting, but there's where Daphne would be, she's sort of vaporous, but then sort of underneath in the layer back is the top of this tree. And so thinking about this idea of then Daphne has already become the tree. And that was just a magical coincidence. and the pleasure of not knowing what you're doing. This piece was very important for a couple different reasons. It's the Master of Van Groot after Jean de Beer, 1515 to 1520. It's an altarpiece, a triptych of the Adoration of the Magi, the Nativity at Night with the Annunciation to the Shepherds, and the Flight into Egypt. And it's oil on panel. And so one thing I was thinking about with this was, I don't really think about depth, how to create illusionistic depth often in paintings. And so I thought, this is a great chance for this show to try out things that I've never really, maybe even had that much of an interest in. So I was thinking about in this layering of the phthalo blue greens to the ochres and the umbers, and then those crimson, those dark reds, and then some of those forest greens. And that was sort of the structure that I had for this piece. And then I love also how it relates to the wyvern prayer bead in that sense again of revealing and concealing and that opening and closing and that kind of sacredness that's built into protecting something or keeping it somehow private. So appearing and disappearing, this is 4 stills from Cuban-American artist Ana Mendietta's Super 8 film, Silueta Sangrienta, Bloody Silhouette, 1975. And thank you to the Mendietta Foundation for these stills. So this Super 8 film is a time lapse, which wonderfully you see her body appearing, like flickering in and out from being a human form to a cavity to being this kind of blood-like being. And I loved the illusion of transformation that's happening in this. I also want to include this quote that Anne had pointed out as Mendietta later explained. I have been carrying out a dialogue between the landscape and the female body based on my own silhouette. I believe this has been a direct result of my having been torn from my homeland, Cuba, during my adolescence. I am overwhelmed by the feeling of having been cast from the womb nature. My art is the way I reestablish the bonds that unite me to the universe. It is a return to the maternal source. And I love that, that quote, and also it had so many relationships, I feel like, to so many different things I was thinking about in the show, in terms of Daphne and Daphne praying to her mother and that transformation and that rootedness that happens, and thinking about my own desire to connect to the universe and to figure out how to do that. So this is another painting in the show, Night Bloom, which is the companion piece to Slaying, and I feel like represents the conclusion of the new Daphne and Apollo myth. And now I'm going to show you some source material of mine from, or how this piece came into being. So this is a clover suit that I made several years ago for a video piece that I grew. And so I've been thinking about Ana Mendietta. She's been a really important artist for me for probably my whole life. So it was really exciting to get to dive deeper into her work for this show and be inspired. So process shots. This is I made a pattern and sewed it together out of grow felt and then stuffed the grow felt with dirt. And initially I planted blood red nasturtium seeds into the suit, thinking about the blood in the Bloody Silhouette video. But also nasturtium symbolizes struggle and victory, which I felt like then connected back to Daphne. And here it is in my studio grow room, looking quite creepy. And there are the little sprouts. Every day I would go in and just obsess. Like I couldn't leave town. It was really, I had to water her I think it was like several times a day. And then it was so exciting, all the new blooms. And then a few lovely plant angels helped me troubleshoot the very challenging growing conditions. So I want to thank Courtney Mongol's Ravenscroft, owner of Marebrook Farm, which is a lovely flower farm, and Cheryl Tyler of Terra Flora, who did some amazing studio visits and helped ease my anxiety. So the deadline was fast approaching, and this is what it looked like. And I had wanted it to be full of blooms, and so it was really nerve-wracking. And at the same time, I realized that blood red nasturtiums, that red does not pick up well for red and scion glasses. So it ended up being a blessing in disguise. At any rate, I planted a whole bunch of seedlings between the nasturtiums. So she blossomed into a night garden flower suit filled with petunias and pansies and alyssum, and with symbolism attached of desire, hope, protection, and love. And then we trooped into the woods, some wonderful friends that are here today. Kyle and Heather and Ava. I see you back there, Ava. Nick, Christina, Pete, and Cheryl, John, and Andy documented all of this. And it was quite a feat. So it took everyone to lower this suit on top of me. And I think my face says it all. Waffles always gets the biggest sticks. Super helpful. I loved looking at these guys from the ground. It felt amazing to have this flower suit. It felt like the weight of the earth was on top of you, very calming, until I had to pee. And then John was wonderfully doing the 3D photo with my iPhone. Very intense. And then here's lovely Johnny and our baby pigeon Pageant, who we rescued during the making of the show. And I'm just gonna give you this photo. She's doing really well, and Waffles hasn't eaten her. So yeah, they're great. And then there was a lot of trial and error, and I was thinking there was probably a more scientific, well, there definitely had to be a more scientific way to do this, but we were just, I would see the picture, it wouldn't line up. It was very, very complicated. And there's Cheryl and Ava. And I love this one. Ava. Thank you, Ava. Turning into a bird. And here is John, I feel like beaming into another supernatural galaxy. And this is me right after I ripped out of the earth. Ready to do it again. Get those 3D glasses out. we got one photo that worked out of hundreds.
Wow. Can I ask a question? What didn't work about the others?
Oh, if the alignment was slightly off, then it would just be very dizzying to look at, and it wouldn't create the full illusion. And then so again, I was thinking about how all of these sort of technical or scientific innovations might lead to the ineffable, sort of that space beyond, that magic portal, and how to tell a new story. And I love this quote by Anne to end it, which is, "Here we experience the transformation of 2 dimensions into 3 and of stasis into movement, transporting us into the realm of the supernatural, where brave new worlds await." The end. Thank you.
Emilie, as always, I find you absolutely captivating. Thank you so much for sharing so many extraordinary insights into this exhibition. And we had this funny challenge. Emilie's show is so special, but in part because of these fabulous sculptures, we knew we wouldn't be able to squeeze everybody into the gallery for a traditional gallery talk. But we realized, or at least I realized, that to quote Emilie, it was a blessing in disguise, because there is so much happening below the surface of these images, which is part of what gives them such richness, that I feel so lucky that we were able to create an opportunity for Emilie to unpack these pieces. And one of the things that really does fascinate me is the degree to which the materiality of Emilie's work really functions metaphorically to help elucidate so many of the connections that she's making. And I love the transition between the 2 and the 3 dimensions. I love the way in which this work enters the space of the viewer. I love the way, Emilie, in which you remind us of the porosity between fantasy and so-called reality. And so we're so grateful to you for sharing the extraordinary work and thought and fun behind these amazing creations that themselves, I feel, are straining their boundaries, which is part of what makes this show so much fun. So we're thrilled that we also have all of you here, because as we all know, without an audience, art does not exist. And so I would just like to open the floor up. We had one question come up already, but I imagine that there are other questions that audience members may have. And so I'd be happy, Kathy, I'd start with you.
Amazing, wonderful talk.
Thank you, Kathy.
I'm so curious. You had access to the entire collection of the Bowdoin College Museum, and you decided to start in the 1500s and got all the way to Anna Mendieta. I mean, tell us about, I can't imagine how you did that.
That's a great question. It was, in some ways at the beginning, it was kind of overwhelming, because I started searching the website, which is wonderful. If you ever wanted to sort of do some diving into the collection, you can start just searching names in the website and seeing, what's in there. And then they also have them grouped by different genres. But I started really with the Pontermo painting, because that painting, I've walked past it for years, and at first I told Frank this, at first I really was like put off by it, because I found it kind of chilling. And I'd always been in love with Bernini's Daphne and Apollo, which has got a kind of romanticism to it, and this one is like kind of horrifying. And then I just fell in love with it and wanted to know more about it. And then I think I was with you, and you pointed out the prayer bead. So it was very organic, and I just was like, wait, what? This is the most incredible little nugget. And it turns out, Kathy, that like the 1500s is my sweet spot. And I made it as far as Chrysophily, those prints, and the Anna Mendieta. But we also talked about, there was work at different points that was involved, like some etchings. Those were still old pieces. But we talked a lot about when we were editing it down to kind of something about the materiality, like there being again, this kind of exquisite materiality or magic to it.
It was funny. I remember the Goya, for example. There was a Goya of a flying woman, which we ultimately stepped away from because it didn't seem like it had quite the same meaning of materiality and message that some of the other pieces did.
And it was like they all needed to shimmer or something. I think all the pieces have some kind of quality that when light hits them, it dances in a way. Does that? Thank you.
Emilie, for months you've been
Oh,
referring
John,
to punch.
can we ask you to?
That's okay, they can hear me.
No, I want to make sure we capture it for posterity, John, for posterity.
Emilie, for months you've been referring to Pontormo, but Ann Collins Goodyear, isn't it in fact Pontormo?
Am I pronouncing it wrong?
I'm asking Ann.
I might have to turn the floor to my Italiophile colleague, Sabrina.
Pontormo or Pontormo?
Which one?
Well done, Sabrina.
Oh,
wow.
thank you. See?
I love it.
Is that really your question?
That was it. I just wanted to insinuate myself at the end of your amazing talk. Who wants the mic?
Dan or Kenny?
I think, we can pass it down.
Pass it down, yeah.
I'm curious, hey Emilie, what the current state of the flower suit is and what the future of the flower suit will be.
I do visit her daily. The question was the current state of the flower suit. Wild, totally wild. So I left her growing in free range in the woods where we did the kind of performance, and she's just been taken. The blood red nasturtiums finally bloomed, and they were incredible. And then the ferns just kind of engulfed her. And it's amazing because it almost looks like an entirely different location. So it's already transformed. Yeah. Thanks. Oh, Dan first, yeah.
Thank you, Emilie. I think I've just seen something right now about Pontormo I would never have understood without your beautiful presentation. And that is, we know that Pontormo was enormously private. He suffered from agoraphobia. And we know this from Giorgio Vasari. And he said something which has haunted me for years. He called him solitary beyond all belief. Solitudine fuori di ogni credenza. And what I realized looking at your sculpture and the painting is that just about any other male Renaissance painter would have identified with Apollo, but I think Pontormo would have deeply identified with Daphne. He would not want to be touched. He avoided human presence, far less contact. So I think that's part of what vitalizes the painting. Is even though he was just young, I think he became more private as he aged. But I think we see that even in the Bowdoin painting.
Thank you so much. I love that because I really do think, going back to this idea of why that painting is so horrifying, I think you do identify with Daphne because she really looks appalled and terrified. So that really resonates with me. And also this idea of privacy, I think is so interesting just because I feel like tangentially, but I brought it up a bunch in the talk, this idea of things being open and closed. I feel like there's something interesting there with this idea of revealing and concealing and private devotion. So thank you.
I'm going to take the next question down here, but then I think there was a question in the back. Wonderful. So we're going to start with.
First of all, it's an amazing show, as Emilie knows, really spectacular and I think unique. It's really something I wish all people who are interested in art could come and see. But picking up on that wonderful comment about this quest about who is Pontormo, I was struck in your photos with the fact that Daphne's musculature is male. And that you have picked that up. If you look at, you could go back to the original painting and then your sculptures, you picked up on the biceps.
Yeah.
But I was almost shocked when I saw your photo of it. And it really made me wonder whether he was, it's an androgynous, look at that musculature in the arms, okay? And to me, that's a very androgynous figure, and I wondered whether some of the enigma of Pontormo that we're talking about might have had to do with his gender preferences.
Could we also talk real quick about the fact that both those figures have a rather shocking penis in them?
Oh, John likes to bring this up.
The bend of that kilt is a giant dick, and Daphne's skirt is also an enormous penis.
Thank you. Thank you.
The idea of the phallus.
I think Lizzie in the back. Yeah. Thank you. That's interesting.
Emilie, I think this is the first time you've worked with sculpture. Is that correct?
Yes, in this, well, everyone's shaking their head.
Okay, that was not the question, actually. That was actually just like the pre-question.
Pre-question, yeah.
So I know you mostly as a painter and a video artist, and I'm wondering if sculpture is something that you plan to continue to explore, if this is like a new frontier for you, and how it's feeling for you in your current artistic palette.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. It was a very different process building the sculptures than painting. Painting, and John knows this, we talk about this because he's gone from sculpture to painting. But with sculpture, at least with these kinds of sculptures, it took, it was a process that just takes a very long time, and it's not as, like with painting, there's a kind of surprise that's happening like moment to moment. And that's happening in the sculpture, but it felt very different. And then all the processes to go from the clay to the resin and then to painting it. I don't know, but it's definitely opened up places in my mind and my heart that I would love to explore. So we'll see. Thank you.
I think there's another question right here.
What was the first painting that you made?
For the
Great
show?
question.
Oh, Ava. So Ava asked what the first painting I made in life was. And I'm going to give that question to my mom.
Like from your soul.
Yeah, from the start.
Let's make sure that we pass the microphone.
I will make you. Two, yeah. So I think, Ava, I was like you, painting from the very beginning, drawing anything that I could just spread out in and let my imagination run. When did you make your first painting?
Probably when I was like
There we go.
Hands, splatter. Okay, done.
So Emily,
Richie.
I think it was like 2013-ish.
Okay.
Coleman Burke Gallery is when I first met you.
Yes, yeah.
And to me, this is more of a comment on you as sort of the epitome of an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Because you were climbing into a stove, doing, exploring just every way to make these monumental videos.
Mm-hmm.
But you were making sculpture, you were making painting. To me, of like all the artists that I know, you are a pure artist. So, whether it's painting or sculpture or video, you're taking that leap. That's just.
Thanks, Richie. Well, I have a lot of ideas constantly, and they're always kind of impossible. And John is always like, you're gonna be sorry you decided to do this, because it's always very challenging. But I can't stop. Yeah.
Oh, yes, Corey.
Thank you, guys.
Congrats, Emily. I was just curious, like you were a curator, like a historian, kind of here. Yeah, you just did a lot of things. You were experimenting. You were like orchestrating these sculptures, and I know you as like a very prolific day-to-day painter. So I'm just curious what came after that, or where your energy is at. If it's back to the hand, or like has this opened up different pathways?
That's a great question. At the moment, I'm like painting. I'm so excited to be just having to deal with the decisions that happen in this frame. But I still have so many ideas in all these different mediums. So we'll see again what happens. But right now, no, I just started like the biggest paintings I've ever made. So that's always fun. And but I definitely feel like this particular show broke open my process in a way that we'll see is definitely transformative. And I'm not sure how it will change things, but it definitely has.
Emily, congratulations, and thanks to the incredible team of people who helped put this all together. Of course, Pontormo's painting is in various shades of gray. And your pictures, both historically and more recently, are in exuberant, wonderful, wild colors. And I'm just wondering if you've ever thought about drawing or painting in grisaille.
That's a great question. I did do interestingly enough, my mom was up for an artist residency last year, and you tend to use a more black and white palette. And I feel like it totally inspired a small group of paintings that I did around when you were here, which were all in black and white. And it was the first time maybe the first and last, I don't know. But it was this wonderful, it awakened so many other conditions, I guess, in the painting that usually color is such a focus. I don't know if I'll do more, but it has inspired me to draw more. So that is kind of a gray, black and white thing. And so I think that, because I would be in the museum drawing from the painting, which was such a great way to process and sort of investigate it.
And the oil clay was exactly that tone in the painting.
Yes.
So I mean, one of the things that I love so much about the Pontormo painted, in grisaille, is that it sort of transports us to a different sort of place. It's not trying to be illusionistic. There is some sort of magical, world. With your extraordinary interest in fantasy, there is something about that palette that activates, your sort of entry into slightly different space.
I love that. And that makes me think that this painting is traveling upstairs to Frank's. No, Frank's doing an amazing show, which involves, it's all on grisaille, and a few of the Pontormos will be brought together for the first time. Come on, Frank.
Well, Emilie, thank you for publicizing what's going on at the museum, but next month we'll be opening a small show in the museum that brings together the 3 only extant portraits or paintings in grisaille by Pontormo. Obviously this picture, which we will scoot upstairs, together with a picture that's at the long-known picture at Bucknell University, and a recently discovered grisaille painting of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, that is now owned in a private collection in New York. And so we're going to have those 3 pictures together with a group of related works from early 16th century Florence to sort of talk a little bit about painting in gray. So it'll be fun.
Yeah. No, it makes me think too about this idea of what type of other world is created by when you take out those colors from it. And then I start thinking about the Wizard of Oz. It's interesting.
Coming.
You're doing so good, Sabrina.
Congratulations, Emilie. It's gorgeous. And one of the things, I wonder if you could talk about the decision, which I think is perfect, to frame the large paintings in that gorgeous frame. Frames.
Yes, so that's interesting to me because I would never frame a painting. That was like one of my rules, and I love breaking rules. So it kind of came from a question. I mean, this is how this show was so wonderfully a dialogue. Anne asked me, "Will the paintings be framed?" And I was like, I wonder if they will. And then I started thinking about, because I was including all of these older pieces that are in these gorgeous frames, and where that's really a part of the concept in some ways of how to enter into these worlds, that it might be a good idea if I'm trying to create this immersive fairy tale to think about framing them. And then I just sort of, I met with Kevin. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his last name. He's a wonderful framer. Kevin Callahan, thank you. Yeah, he's excellent. So he met with me, and then I did a lot of research on frames that, looked sort of period appropriate, thinking about this 1500 period, and was really excited by how it turned out, just sort of thinking again about illuminated manuscripts and these portals, and also we talked about this sort of the plant life and sort of that is in the kind of frames, these curvatures like leaves and vines, and is in the text, and yeah.
It was great. It made total sense.
Thank you.
It was wonderful.
Wonderful. And I think we'll conclude, Catherine, with your question.
Emilie, this has been extraordinary. It is a journey that you've taken us on, and I'm so interested because being of the 16th century, I am always concerned about how the older art gets buried today with the emphasis on everything contemporary. And what you've done is you've opened the eyes and the thoughts of everyone in this audience to what older art can be and how it fits seamlessly in the creativity of today. And I'm very moved by it, and I thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Could I ask just one further question? That's such a beautiful note, Catherine. I love that. And because we have the pleasure of recording this talk, I want to just add one more question to get your perspective on it. I'm so struck and interested in the observations about Pontormo's Renaissance painting. And I agree, Catherine. I think, Emilie, you've given us a lens through which to see these paintings anew. But I was so interested in this idea of that gender ambiguity, and in a sense, maybe a little bit of an ambiguity between Apollo and Daphne, and the way in which you further perhaps contribute to that breakdown, Emilie, especially through the way in which Daphne spears or penetrates Apollo with her branches. But today I noticed a detail that I hadn't picked up on before, but it concerns the animation, and so I'm interested to get your thoughts. But I always read in the virtual, in the augmented reality animation, the figure that is in the ground with the leaves sprouting up as being Daphne, but this evening it struck me, actually, maybe it's really Apollo, and I just wondered if you had thoughts or views or anything that you wanted to observe about your own interpretation of these two figures, and I think the really fascinating ways in which you allow the two of them to blur or interpenetrate.
I love that, and I think what I love too is that again, the way you've just described it is giving me a new sense of it myself, because now I'm like, oh my God, maybe it is Apollo. So I think that any kind of slippage like that, or ability to where something can open up to a new dimension of itself, I think is what I would hope the work could do, in the sense that I hope that it can be many different things to many different people. And I think that sparks my imagination, this idea that Apollo and Daphne, they do kind of become one, and then in that explosion, maybe Apollo becomes those nasturtiums. I mean, it's sort of infinite, the possibilities.
I cannot think of a better note on which to conclude. The infinite possibilities.
Infinite possibilities.
Of Emilie Stark-Menneg's Supernatural.
Anne is not wrong.
It's not wrong.
And I want to follow up on Emilie's invitation for everybody to take time to see the exhibition again. It is constantly revealing new things.
And there are some amazing other exhibitions going on. There's an incredible photography show, and then also the Mina Loy exhibit. The museum is bursting. It's lovely.
Thank you, Emilie.
Yeah.
So come on over.